All right, so that's a tough act to follow because, as everybody knows, it's pretty interesting. So maybe we should talk about M&A in the sports world. Chris Yancey, run a broker dealer and work at family offices.
Fantastic. Serge?
Good morning. Thank you, Marty, for having me. Serge Johnert, Managing Director of the Merger Company, boutique tech investment bank based in Southern California. Tech exec for 30 plus years before I got into this full time, did startups, large corporates, acquisitions, divestitures, carve outs, did 14 tech M&A transactions over the last 5 years.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Great. So, you guys are active practitioners. Serge, maybe you can tell me what the market is like for M&A last year, what you anticipate next year, and has there been a change in animal spirits?
Well, I'm definitely. It was interesting listening to some of the other panels yesterday, and a lot of the focus on AI. I'm definitely in the herd zone right now, in that I focus on a lot of vertical AI companies.
I'm shooing people away. I'm sorry, guys. We need to move you guys out of the room. So I'm sorry, Serge. So you were saying because of AI, you're seeing a lot more potential, or?
Well, I'm definitely seeing a lot of potential, but I'm doing some work with some of the vertical AI companies that emerged post-COVID and right at the onset of ChatGPT. These companies, and it was something that both Manoj and Suzanne Murphy mentioned yesterday as well. A lot of these companies are being overlooked and unfortunately may fail before they reach their full potential. And but that is an area where I'm very active. I'm getting a lot of feedback. So
yeah, I know, Serge. Guys, you gotta move all the way out. Dan, can you take your tribe with you and move them out? Thanks. And Serge, I need you to turn up your volume too.
Oh.
Help me out, Pete. Thanks. All righty, keep on going, Serge.
Yeah, so I would say activity is definitely picking up. Like for everybody, has been a little bit underwhelming. But definitely looking forward to next year and things picking up.
Okay, Chris.
I think in the essence of time on a blustery afternoon, we'll just cut to the chase. We all know that mergers and acquisitions have been somewhat log jammed over the last 2 years, and hopefully post-election and some changes at the administrative level, we can break this log jam and get some funds flowing again, because a lot of people have been gated into the privates that they all loaded up in from 2017 to 22, and they're all looking for exits because everybody's getting older. And I think once some of those transactions can take place, then maybe we can release some of the animal spirits that we've talked about at these other sessions.
And any sectors that you see in particular? I mean, you're giving us kind of, I know you practice globally, but East Coast as well, and what you're seeing in New York?
I'm not really seeing much in New York per se, but we follow the consumer space is where we have a lot of investments, and we're hoping that some of the bigger funds can actually deploy capital and take out some of these brands. We have a couple of cosmetic brands. We have a sunscreen company that we're looking to see if we can move. So there's a couple of things on that front that I think if some of the bigger funds can start putting their money to work and take people out, then we can get the ball rolling again at the lower end of the stack, because we focus on Series A companies, and there's a lot of them that are up and coming, and they need capital. And right now they're being starved.
Wow. I think I just saw one of the greatest legends in mergers and acquisitions walk in the door here. David Robb is here. So if you know David, we'll introduce you guys around. Serge, tell us about what you're seeing on the West Coast.
Well, I'm doing quite a bit of work on the West Coast, but I work worldwide. I'm doing some work in Europe. That's flat right now. Doing some work in the Middle East. Needless to say, with everything that's going on, that's all on hold. Yeah, most of my activity is in tech. I have a couple of companies in the AI space that I'm working. I have one company in the wound care that's coming online in the next couple of weeks. So that'll be a very interesting one. But overall, yeah, I mean, it's a little bit of a mixed bag. I mean, there isn't, I would say, a consistent thread where I would say everybody's gravitating there, and that's where all the opportunity is. So.
Got it. Got it. So, the IPO market has been, pretty tender the last couple of years in terms of not much production coming out of it. So you would get to be more movement towards mergers and acquisitions because people just have to get liquid, right? So do you think that with rates going down and maybe a couple of IPOs that have been in the line, sort of freeing up, do you think that will lead to more activity in the M&A space?
I've heard a couple of times over the course of the last 2 days that rates are coming down. Last I checked, the 10-year still at 440. So I don't really know what that means. I mean, maybe, and I think the front end of the curve is what I'm still competing with while raising money from high net worth individuals. And I've been doing this for 30 years and I've never, competed with the front end of the curve before. So it's kind of an odd animal for us. So the interest rate environment still has to work its way through. And again, everybody doesn't realize that the zero interest rate environment was also allowed to take place vis-a-vis QE and all that, partly because we were still living off the back end of the peace dividend. But now we're going back to a world of trading blocks and stuff like that. And you need some slack in sort of interest rates in order for that world to function. So if anybody believes that we're going back to what we had over the last so many years, which was a boon to private equity, they're sadly mistaken. I don't think that there's going to be a dramatic move back to like 2% on the 10-year. Unless the new administration can pull some rabbits out of a hat. I don't disagree that you should probably see some more private transactions now that the IPO market is stagnant, and the IPO market is stagnant for a variety of reasons, partly because the Magnificent Seven are sucking up all the oxygen in the room, and I don't know where the additional capital come from.
As a comment to the Magnificent Seven, we had a movie producer come into one of our events many years ago, and he had done Rocky and Rambo, and he said everybody's talking about how the movies are all coming back, but there's no movies. There's only this Avatar movie. That's all there is. They're taking all the money. They're sucking all the air out of the room. So maybe Magnificent Seven are the same, right?
Well, and what people don't understand, I mean, look, there's some machinations to the way the world works, and if people are looking at the Magnificent Seven, what nobody has come out and said overtly is that they are the 7 companies that don't need to access the bond market.
And they make acquisitions like crazy, though, right?
And but when you have free cash flow machines like that, it's kind of an interesting way to look at it. They don't need the market needs them. They don't need the market, which is kind of a rare state of affairs.
Yeah. So, Serge, your thoughts?
Yeah.
Geopolitical impact. Do you think that? I mean, you're living it, right?
Yeah, a little bit of that, and that's definitely when we talk about international transactions a factor. But because to your question earlier about IPOs, I think that right now the funnel is broken. We have a huge base of kind of new and emerging startup companies that unfortunately cannot progress. And are seeking growth capital, and there's this big gap where PEs are not stepping in, VCs are not able to provide, and IPOs are also no longer an option for smaller companies because the regulatory threshold is just too high and it's very costly.
Okay, interesting. Yeah. So, and given Chris's point of view on the geopolitical, if we devolve into trading blocks, that might have a different worldview. Although there may be more mergers and acquisitions of a certain type as a result, maybe in defense or security.
Yeah, I think. Look, everything is a cycle, and things will become into vogue, and we have to look at the typical bellwethers that everybody talks about, demographic shifts, and I mean, I was just, I'm musing about this whole sports thing. Where everybody's going to get the time and to play pickleball and watch 42 different leagues and do everything that they're doing. I mean, I guess everybody's hoping that we go to a 3-day work week. In regards to IPOs, one of the things that we found interesting, we've done about 12 pre-IPO SPVs, and the selling point for that is they're coming out of the oven so fully baked, as opposed to historically using the capital markets as a way to put money on the balance sheet. They're coming out at 40, $50 billion valuations. And then when they come out at those valuations, they have an inherent buyer in all the index products, be it ETFs or mutual funds or what have you. So it's kind of an interesting, flywheel that the street created by having these larger companies go public at such a mature state.
So when you guys are looking at these, acquisitions, are you seeing the circumstances of the acquisitions? Are there, more, special agreements in place? Like, you're acquiring a company, are you getting earnouts or, owner financing or things like that? Any thoughts on that? I mean, obviously we have this huge group of people who are retiring, the baby boomers are retiring, and they're trying to sell their companies. So your thoughts?
Well, in our world, again, we travel a lot in the CPG world. So we had a cosmetic company called Ilya. Ilya was doing fantastic. It really was a good education in learning about how the Sephora network, the Sephora and the Ultas of the world really can drive success and product and all that kind of stuff. But they were acquired by L'Oreal. Oh, no, I'm sorry, the Clarence family, and that was their first foray into an acquisition as a family. So that's the world that we typically live in, is that these entrepreneurs luckily are not plagued by what we have coined as founderitis, where they want to hold on too long. We like going into companies with $30-40 million valuations, and if they can get to 400 to 600 million, we believe that there's like 30-40 buyers for them at that number. We don't like investing in things at $2-4 billion valuations, because then ultimately they either have to go public or they're acquired by somebody huge, and that's a much more finite group of people that can do it. So that's the
Marty,
will be so.
quick question, if you know.
Sure, yeah.
So just a general comment to Serge, if I can help, and then I have the question about private equity. Serge, with DARPA, there in my intellectual property background, there is a significant amount of intellectual property around wound care. So if there's something you want to send to Marty, send to me to review. This is a huge topic for the soldier in the battlefield, and there's a great need for that. So if there's ways to help, let me know. The question I have is about private equity buying companies. I think I read in the journal that private equity owns 20% of companies, and recently there's a big story about Jersey Mike's. I live in New Jersey. They were bought for almost $8 billion, I think. So do you see that trend continue? And then I wonder if any studies have been done after private equity buys a company, their performance thereafter. Do you bring in a new management team or scale and so on? I don't know. Thoughts on that?
Well, first of all, one answer, definitely will be in touch. I took a note yesterday when you mentioned it, and so I will definitely reach out in due time. On the private equity, I think it's also a function of the different PE companies. They all have different operating models. Some of them kind of leave companies intact, just provide them capital and support and let them grow. Others take a much more hands-on approach, will consolidate shared services like HR, finance, and whatever. And I wouldn't say that one or the other works better. It also depends a little bit on what the whole thesis was of the acquisition. If it's a succession and the CEO literally wants to hand over the keys and walk away the next day, then yes, there is going to be a need to put a new management team in place, maybe. But in general, though, most, especially the bigger Ps, have definitely gotten this down to an art and can deliver on a promise of making companies perform better.
In regards to the Jersey Mike's deal, I'm not really sure why you would pay $805 million for a baseball player, or why you would pay $8 billion for a sandwich shop. I would really love to see that spreadsheet and find out what they believe that growth model is. I think it's great for Cancro and the Point Pleasant area down there. I actually know a couple of guys in that world, and they all know him, and he is salt of the earth, and it's a great deal for that part of the world. But it's interesting. It's kind of like you never get fired for hiring the Harvard kid. And I think if you're on that deal team, you're not going to get, no one's going to pitch a moan if you buy an $8 billion deal on something like that. It befuddles me. And like I said, I'd love to see the spreadsheet on where they think that's going. And maybe they have something else up their sleeve that they want to do with something like that. And that leads to, sometimes like rolling up veterinarian shops, doing all the, I don't know if we're at the beginning of a cycle or if there's just at the end of a cycle, or if there's just smarter guys in the room than me. A lot of times I just don't see it. That's why we like the space. Like if you got a company, like I'm doing this non-alcoholic beer, it's fantastic, tastes great, not less filling. No, but it's doing 10 million in rev this year. It's going to do 20 million next year. That thing can get to 40 million. Somebody's going to buy it because they need it in their suite, and it won't be that expensive. And then there's a lot of evergreen market that everybody can go get it into full distribution, and you can monetize the heck out of that thing. I don't know if you're going to take 3,500 Jersey Mikes and make 6,000 of them. I don't. Maybe that's the plan. I don't know. But there's definitely
maybe they're going to be mini Jersey Mikes, or maybe they'll start selling jerseys. Is get into the sports world. So Serge, are you seeing any kind of special preconditions on mergers and acquisitions in your space? I mean, one of the big things in tech used to be acqui-hires, and I'm reading that even those are in decline. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it's there's definitely a risk aversion, and acqui-hires are always a component of that, right? I do believe in the vertical AI space, and that was kind of echoing what some of the things that were said yesterday, that we are going to see a severe consolidation in the AI space, especially in the vertical AI space.
Wow.
With a lot more acqui-hires, right? Smaller companies that have been around only for a year or two and are running out of money and can't secure any growth funding. They have great tech, that have great opportunity, that present great opportunities for a much actually bigger play in private equity, but where it just hasn't resonated yet. And I did a write-up on that yesterday on LinkedIn. I was surprised that already 2,000 people read it, but it contextualizes a little bit of what we discussed yesterday and today. So,
do you think AI will impact a lot of these software houses as well? I mean, we had this company that presented yesterday, and they said they don't anticipate their cost of software development going up markedly because they're able to do a lot of software development using AI right now.
Well, I think the big challenge is that there's been so many great little companies that have emerged that are narrowly focused on very specific industrial market segments. It's unfortunate that some of the talent is just some of these groups are gonna get disbanded. Some of these programmers, some of these product people are just gonna roll into some of the bigger companies, and some of that IP is just going to get lost, unfortunately. But yeah, we're definitely going to see shakeout next year.
In regards to AI, it's another movement that sort of happened gradually. Then suddenly everybody was kind of talking about it. It was kind of ephemeral, and then all of a sudden it showed up on everybody's desktop, and every kid was doing his homework on it. My thesis on that is I'm not really sure. There may be a couple of bellwether sort of marquee brand names that we can identify with AI, but we're working with a fintech AI, and what they're seeing is the proprietary AI that a UPS is building or a JP Morgan is building, the internal AI that they're building for their own specific problems in-house, we'll never see in the marketplace. That's not going to become an IPO. That's not a separate company. But you may see the benefits of that where they're going to earn a penny or more a share or 2 cents or more of share because AI is streamlining their internal procedures and all that kind of stuff. So that I'm kind of leaning towards that, where people are using AI to solve very particular problems that they have in-house.
Great. We have about 5 more minutes, but there's a question from the audience. Nippon Steel was blocked by Biden. Do you, in its acquisition of U.S. Steel, do you think U.S. Steel will be acquired by a U.S. firm? Thoughts, Serge?
Oh,
U.S. Steel?
not my sector. Wouldn't dare to judge on that.
Chris?
Last I read, I think that U.S. Steel's got some real problems if a merger does not take place. The thought was from the article that the Trump administration was probably going to deny it as well. So I think U.S. Steel becomes a jump ball domestically, and whether or not they can get the same valuation that Nippon was offering. But it also goes to show you that DC, I think, is somewhat removed from the way the world works a little bit.
I don't think there's any. Did England just lose its last steel manufacturer? I think. Yeah, they just shut it down.
Yeah. I mean, if I remember back in the day, I mean, a lot of this, it's very funny too, because we had this, of all things, we had this pig iron plant down in like Alabama sitting on a river, and these guys were buying it to refurbish it. We had an opportunity to take it out, and I candidly, as a New Yorker, I had no idea what pig iron was. So I had to go look it up and find out what it is. And eventually we didn't really do it, but then COVID happened, and you found out that we get like 60% of our pig iron from some Russian province. And that all shut down courtesy of that. So that those guys made a fortune because they started making pig iron. So at the end of the day, we don't make a Tylenol in this country. And now it appears that England's not making a piece of steel. And I think from a national security perspective, that's terrible.
If, for what it's worth, many years ago when I was an engineer first, I started working at Bethlehem Steel. They closed up all the steel facilities around the country. I do have a client that you may be listening on right now. He owns 3 steel mills in Pennsylvania, recently up for sale, still going through the process and happening. But in light of all the tariff discussions and your exact concern about security issues, I think it's fair to say the valuation of that entities have really gone up since the election as well.
So I'll tell you a great acquisition story is that when Russia was going under, all of the military bases were abandoned, and Russia, as wealthy as it is in energy, also has some of the most free energy in terms of hydropower. Like you see these X-Men movies, it's always at a Russian military base off of some kind of a dam or something like that. So the biggest part of production of aluminum is energy, right? I mean, I think that the basic element, I think it's called bitumen or something like that, is pretty common around the world. So Oleg Deripaska got some financial backers from England, and he said, well, let me start buying up these Russian military bases that aren't being used. And he started producing all this aluminum, and he became the world's lowest cost producer. So maybe energy is a big part of the story when it comes to steel or things like that as well, right?
Well, but from a national security perspective, like every major,
you can't be a world power without steel.
Yeah, I mean, when Germany was, let's go back as the history buff here, but when Germany was unified, there was a glut of munitions being made by France and Britain, but then the new German Republic sat there and said, we got to make our own weaponry, right? And they're like, but there's plenty. You could buy it from the French and the English. And they're like, we're not doing that. And the same thing goes here. Like, Boeing forgot how to make an airplane, but we still need Boeing because at some point you're going to need military planes. And GM has been bailed out 42 times because somebody's got to make tanks. So at the end of the day, there's some basics to how you got to run a nation.
Yep.
And probably having a steel manufacturer in-house is one of those basics.
Strategic technology, maybe Intel or DARPA takes over the company. So, okay, so we're going off into the new year. Are we parting thoughts in terms of where you see things going, just a general economy and also private equity in M&A? Serge?
Well, I'm pitching a thesis of having private equity, traditional industry private equity and tech private equity working together, and using an AI for roll-ups that have some of the old industries and looking at bringing in more efficiencies, more intelligence. So hopefully there's going to be some movement in that in the next year. I'm banking on that. So we'll see.
Fantastic. Great. Chris?
Trees don't grow to the sky. So I'm hoping that maybe we see a little bit more democratization in terms of the allocation of capital throughout a greater part of the market, because as Serge said earlier, there are some up and coming companies that are starved for growth capital. Some of them are not able to survive. They're going out of business, and some great ideas are being left on the table because, there's a handful of groups that are just taking, like I said earlier, up all the oxygen. So hopefully in 25, we see a little bit more of things spreading out and the liquidity of the market irrigating a lot more of the field.
I'm in alignment with Chris. I think there's some sclerosis in the markets. It needs to be cleared up a little bit. Maybe there's some deregulation that happens. So anyway, guys, thanks so much for waiting all the way through to this last panel. I know sports is hard to follow. So, but again, have a great new year and happy holidays.
Happy
guys.
holidays, everyone.
Thank
See
you.
you in January.